Okay, today I thought we would go over Egyptian Ooparts again. Just a few of the things, for if I went over all of them, I would never shut up. This is this is an example. We're going to look at quite a few of them, showing you something that looks just like pottery. But they made it out of a stone that's a conglomerate stone, where the lighter stone you see there is actually softer than the darker stone that you see that's mixed in together in a Dalmatian pattern. But yet they seem to have no problem carving this. What's odd is this: if someone said this may be found during the Ptolemaic dynasties and so on, it might start to make sense to someone, but still it would blow you away. But to know that this was at the earliest of dynasties, that right there in the middle of the bottom you can see a scratched in sign of Horus, and it's just scratched into it really crudely. But all these are dated to the very first dynasties of Egypt, and were given in penance apparently to one of these great pharaohs. And it's not like there's just a few of them, for they have about 40,000 of them. Flinders Petrie mentioned these along with a lot of other things like those core drills and things that are still not explained to this day. In fact, are kind of dismissed, and they want to just pretend that they have no idea why that it happened, or no, let's not talk about that. These things look like they're made on a lathe. You can see how flat topped this is. The strange thing is, and we'll see a few of them here in a little while, is that the lids for these are gone, and it would have been a hermetically sealed lid at one time, but those lids are no longer evident anywhere, and they just have this wump of mud that they start using as the lid on them, which is not even a technology used on the pottery pieces. They at least have a made pottery piece, which seemed extremely odd. This looks like it could be made on a lathe very easily, except for one thing about it is right over here there's these loops which mimic the way that they make pottery during this time, and even before in the pre-dynastic coming into it. Well, they have this little loop on the edge, and then a rope is supposed to go through that and across, and there's another one of those there, and they crisscross tie across it, and it helps to hold the lid down and whatever's in it, and seal it like a jar and so on. Again, the lids they have for these are just really not something that could actually even go with this style here. You could make it on a lathe pretty easy. Only thing is you couldn't have that still sticking out. Whenever it went around and around and around, you'd knock this thing off. And there is a little ridge right here running over the top of that, which shows that at one time it probably went down at an angle, and then they gouged back down on this and smoothed it off. Irregardless, even that little spindle on the side of it that's round shows a perfection that just doesn't make any sense, especially given the time frame. For at this time they're smacking rocks with rocks, hopefully using one that's harder than the other versus each other, and are just starting to use copper. Only problem is that most of the darker or harder elements in this Dalmatian type stone are actually harder than copper. Actually, you have to get to the point of brass, and then you start having a heads-up competition, which is not acceptable. Sometimes when I think about this, I think of this long diatribe that the Sumerians had, that was a couple of tablets long, describing exactly which stones, starting from extremely soft all the way to extremely hard like diamond and corundum, and how one scratches the other and one scratches the other, that they had already figured all of this out. They have the same type of work too, and indeed it may have come from the Sumerians in some way. When the Sumerians left and all that bullshit happened, they may have taken a lot of things with them whenever they went, but there surely would be some of this or enough of this left over there to where it would show up. Some place in a Badarian or Nakata culture and stuff, and when you see those burials, it's always the pottery with the red ochre drawings and stuff on them that we see carrying back in the Natufian culture all the way back to Cro-Magnon times and cave art and stuff I've showed you. But in the same breath, there's nothing like this. And after we get through the 4th, 5th dynasties and make the pyramids and everything that goes on, they had a collapse, which I showed you early in the year. They figured out was from a volcano, and it caused an extreme drought, and it ruined the first set of dynasties. And so it went into the first intermediate period and came out of it. And the problem is that they never attained back this. They only had few of those crystal blue eyes that we've looked like in so many statues that they had in the very earliest dynasties, starting it out. Crystal blue eyes with pink granite, or actually granite with pink veins in it, and they used it to make it look just like their eyes. An incredible thing, which could have been perfected on more and more and more, even though it looked like real human eyes. In fact, compared to the statue, it was the standout. And then later on, they have a weaker appearance of such. But to look through a few of these bowls that they have here is quite telling. And you can see that there is a uniformity to some of the sizes here, leading you to believe that that may be made on a lathe, but yet there are other ones that are just a hair bigger, just a hair smaller, just a hair deeper, just a hair that don't match up. In most of these, you can easily see, if you're looking at them, and even in pictures, which doesn't show it up as well, in the very center, a little ring that's in some of these, showing you where it was held on. And then if they had taken a large piece of granite, they drilled a core drill out of this thing and started working it. Problem being is that, well, they don't let people mess with these anymore for some reason, ha ha ha. But they have a perfection to them that again shows a lathe type of working. And why would somebody go through the trouble of making some stoneware like this that's so incredible as compared to that pottery that looks just like it, if this wasn't something that was easy? You could say it was something that was more difficult, and so they're doing that for the gods and all this type of stuff, but there's no way to rationale how they possibly could have done that. There's no explaining it off. The top left here, you kind of see some Dalmatian type, and it's a see-through. Whenever you get a good light on it, it becomes see-through, and they're to the point that it's just slightly opaque. There's a lot of these, and some of them are paper thin. Well, not paper thin, but of an 1/8 of an inch thin. There's one example here which looks extremely lathe work to anybody who has eyes to see, for its simple center part I was talking about before, and then consecutive circles. But look how this is undercut to where this is almost paper thin, paper thin, paper thin, paper thin. Most are not this thin. Most would end up, well, we call them paper thin. It's like an 1/8 of an inch. But if you're trying to carve out stone and get it that thin, it's nearly impossible without having the thing fracture into pieces or get to a good point and the whole thing crack. It makes no sense, even to people that are extreme workers nowadays with diamond drills on high-powered lathes, say that this is incredible to be able to do something like that. If I took a piece of slab of granite and put it on a lathe and worked this out of it, I would be proud as hell. Yet put it in the time perspective that we're given, and it doesn't make any sense. Oddly, it's things like this that have the Caucasians, which had something to do with this, with their amnesia fit that's going on, even to this day, say, well, then this is aliens. This was alien stoneware This was alien foodware here or something. It's got to be aliens. As if we didn't have some capability. Well, the dogma tells you that we didn't, but what do your eyes tell you? Again, Flinders Petrie pointed out all these things, and people have tried to write this off for years for some reason. Here there's another set of these, and while that one on the left in the top corner looks like a cone head, it's really just turned upside down on its head that's there. And here's a few different ones, so it's not like there's singularity one bit whatsoever. But you can see this vase works that you saw on the top right there, and all this different types of stone, and they're all making it out. And then again, in that picture there of, well, let's see if we can get it to show well. You can see the center in that one again too, right here, and how it's worked down, and the rim. And just looking at this vase type work here and stuff, it just shows you something. Then again, this is the handmade stone pottery that they have at this time. And everybody else seems to be getting this pottery, and from then on kind of works on that. And while the pottery comes up one step in pottery, there never again is that type of stonework. Again, there are over 40,000 pieces of this, so this is just a small spattering shown into a museum here, and not necessarily a real good showing of all of it in any way. There's a uniformity to things like this, and this reminds me of a pot we would use nowadays, but this looks like it was one of those cosmetics that they would crush up in. But one would think that this must have worked for a group of people rather than just one. It's a huge amount in the crucible area that's shown there. And while this could be a lid, there's no matching bowl that goes to it at that side. But, you know, strangely, cooking bowls, stoneware, and we have stone impregnated ware nowadays. If you're looking at these guys here, this is, it's just unreasonably finely made, is one way to say it. Again, you can barely see it here, but there's a scratched in, kind of crudely made early hieroglyphics showing you. And of course, this is how they date all these things along this line. They want to use that dating, and so, you know, you think of this as being a lid, but these are these mud lids. This right here are these mud lids that they found that correspond to each one of these jars. That looks so crude and so sad compared to even the pottery work. It doesn't make any sense either. Regardless of whichever way you're looking at this, to have those lids and those pots, I mean, I understand a mixed lid and a pot thing in your house, sometimes not like that, but seriously, I mean, it's kind of odd. Here's some more of them that are more conical and so on. So, and whenever you get a flash down inside one of these jugs, you can see how well it's worked. Again, here's the other lids. And so there's an issue with these type of jugs here. Again, this Dalmatian looking pottery here that's so perfectly made, and it's just one of the Oopart situations. For hopefully it's showing up in this picture right here, but you can see the scoring tool that worked its way down inside of here. Now, Flinders Petrie made a mention that the tool that they would have had to use down there would have had to have been a one-side carving tool with a lathe firmly attaching and able to spin the pot at the same time, or they couldn't have done this, because the aperture at the mouth in most of these cases does not allow for a tool to go in it and then spread out in any way and become larger and then just set and carve down. So it had to be a one-sided thing that was going down this side like that. One thing else that he noticed too, by real careful using and calipers and stuff coming in, you take a caliper and you pinch it around this thing, just like you would pinch your belly and see how much belly fat you have, and you go down this thing, and he says it's uniform, all except for the bottoms in some cases where it starts to get a little thicker. That makes sense. Some of these things were within an eighth of an inch of penetrating through on the other side. So it's not like the inside doesn't match the outside, but it matched it almost perfectly in a lot of cases. Somewhat thicker up under the lip that's right there making that, but then you would want that for stability. It goes past the point of strange and crazy. It really does. And of course there's these, but then we've seen that schist disc before, right? You've seen it to where it's real thin and almost looks like some kind of wheel for a car or something, or a turbine spinning type of wheel or something along that line. Well, there's other things that are made like that too. It's not really alone, although this doesn't have the ring that runs around it. They were able to cut this in, and again, here's this ring that's inset into it, and they made this, and it literally, to your eyes, looks like that what they did was make flexible stone. They did this whole thing, and then what they do, heat it up to where it started glowing, and then they just took and peeled and folded it in like this thing is a taco or something. Is that what you want to go with? Or they want you to think that, so they carved it. Well, look how thin this rim is here onto it. It's like an eighth of an inch at best. Sure, it gets a little thicker around the center part of it there and where it sits at. And you think of this as some bullshit thing. This is just like my mom used to have this set up that was like grapes and everything sitting around on it, right? Like a centerpiece. And corelle ware you could understand in a modern day, but something like this just doesn't make any sense. And again, they date these things off of the fact that some of them, but they were all in situ together, so that tries to put it to where they had these old, before even really the true hieroglyphics, before there really was, and those chads that they show that are little tabs, a lot of times made of ivory, that they have that on there. Well, this is on a jug and so on. So I hope you've seen a lot of things like this along that idea, but let's look at something else too. Let's look at a statue here, and this is 4th Dynasty, so this is the first workings of diorite. A lot of the statues before this are actually plastered in pottery over a slight stonework, or they're made out of wood. And when you look at this thing, there have scratches. That's where they get the name from and the idea it's 4th Dynasty. Well, we've seen the fact that a lot of these pharaohs steal things from each other and write their names on it. Did this even happen back the very first part? Because even though this is cracked off and he's lost half his head here, you can barely see at the top of it, you can see the fine craftsmanship of this. And this is either andesite or diorite. So it's up on a Mohs scale that puts it higher than copper, and that they were able to form this. And you think that they were able to do something like this by smacking two rocks together and shit. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. When you look down on the foot pad of this guy right down here, you end up seeing this crudely scratched in. And they say because that name is crudely scratched in, that's who it was. It's Userkov or whoever it was. Does anybody else find it odd that they could make a statue that pretty, but yet they couldn't do engraving just yet? They can do bas relief like crazy, but can't do engraving internal, which is an easier aspect. Rather than leaving the letters and carving away and leaving them like bas relief, it's just carving into it. Problem with that carving into it situation is all the early ones even show there that they do it to a fine edging. It's all squared off real good. It's not just a gouging line in there. But some of them, like those super boxes, have that gouged line in there, and it doesn't make any sense really either, does it? So you're taking a look at that. That's not impressive in any way compared to the statue, which is quite impressive. And there are other times whenever you can find this keenly engraved here, and they point out the idea that these names that go along with statues are put on after the fact because it actually overlaps, and it shouldn't really overlap, and it's actually not even in the right place on their body, onto their belt or made in, so on. Then there are these incredible boxes here that are in the Serapeum that are made to a point that nowadays modern stoneworkers could just go, oh, that's incredible. And they said, great, can you make us one and tell us what you have to go through? And he goes, well, we can make one, but I'll have to make it out of 5 separate pieces and you can bolt it together. And they go, no, we want you to take a solid piece of granite like they did and cut the top quarter off of it just like they did. So it was 80 tons and now it's 65 and 15 on the top. And then you're going to gouge out the top and make it to where it perfectly hermetically seals onto the bottom, which they show these inside lips on all these guys. And that's going to perfectly fit and all be flat. And then the inside has to be perfectly square, and it can only be this amount of inches all the way around. And we want it perfectly smooth like this. And the guy says, you lost me at, no, we'd like to do it a different way. Even though they do all this stuff, they go, it's just really kind of impossible. I don't know what we'd have to go through, how long it would take, how many years it would take to do such a thing. It's crazy. There's other places like Abu Ruash and other places they can show that there's polished stone. And then whenever you put the water on top of it and whoosh across of it, other times you would not want to put the water across it. But when you do so, you can see the sheen across it, and where there's circular patterns and marks that are all over things. It shows up just an oddity to where you can't see. So you can look at these core holes that they show, and I don't know if you're really catching it right here, but you can see this. It almost looks like a record whenever you're kids. Anybody remember records? And you can see that this is a long song that's in here that record needle will go on, and that yet the difference in the lengths of that, and this thing would have been making one revolution as it makes it each little row down there, is about 300 times faster than we would do today. And if we tried to do something like this, you would overheat and break the bit within about an inch, has been said by a few different people. And yet here they have these perfectly plowed holes into them. By the way, once you get this done, you take and pop this out of there, and that ends up being that cylinder seal, which are real popular in Samaria. So I thought early on that they trade them that for lapis lazuli or things like that. What goes on? How does that happen? I think there's a good picture here of the inside of one that the sun's shining in, and so when the sun's shining into it, you can actually see different things. And this is just an area that's ruined, and they really don't let people go into this, probably because it's ruined, probably because it's full of things that show off. But here again, hopefully you can see it, all of these lines that are across here and how fast it was cut. When they do that thing with that copper saw idea, you'd think it'd end up with something like this, but it doesn't. It slowly eats through each one of those lines. It's not like you can go saw, and I'm on another line, saw, and I'm on another line. That's what this shows. This shows that during revolutions, this thing was going 10 to 15 microns at a time across that thing. It's a fast cut. It's like a circular saw when you're cutting wood. Only problem being there's a slight arch to this scratches that are on here, and they say, well, that wheel that's on the saw must have been about 30 foot in diameter. And spinning it 3,000 revolutions at least to pull off something like this. This is what it looks like in a modern day when you do something like that. Then from this point it has to be polished. And you can see this core hole punched out in here, and a lot of people look at this, don't look at the secondary part where all of a sudden this is machinery here and it looks like something locked into it somehow. Whether you want to go with they locked wood into it and they made notches in the wood so it didn't spin, and they did this and that with it. What did that? What was that purpose? What's it got to do with? What were they making? Because it's shattered right down the middle now. Where's the other piece? It's way the hell over there. There's another slab that's just like this, only it's worked to a polish, and it's at Abu Ruwash. Showed it in one of my other videos as one of the first Oopart ones I did, of these ideas of these unfinished pyramids, of course. And it's right there where you can actually, in the distance, see the Great Pyramids from where Abu Ruwash is. But in that polished one they have in Abu Ruwash, it actually has a convex to it a little bit. And I often thought, what do? Rub that down with water or maybe even oil? And then, because it's convex, like a lens, it perhaps zooms in on the sky, like you're looking into a parabolic mirror. Strange idea, but then again on that one, they show that it has such an angle to it that it's not something that's the size of a circular saw or anything that we have today. It would be a blade that's about 35 foot in diameter. Doesn't make any sense really, right? There's a few other things shown here that don't make sense either, like cuts that are in this raw pink granite that are gouged down into it, but squared in the depth of it too, going about 1.5 inches deep. Problem with that is that these little things that they show they made it out of don't ever show you one that's skinny or finite, where it would have been able to make any of these finite cuts that are shown on the end progress of all of these cuts. So you can look up and down this and you can see how it went real far, but see, there's another problem with this. For if somebody was just chipping this away, understand that if somebody's just chipping this away slowly, right, that it would take days and days and days and days to end up making through this, right? So if they're coming along making this line that's here, whenever they veered off to the left here, that you see about 3.5, 4 inches worth at least, if not 5, and then stopped. Why is it from here to here it's a gradual less and less depth, and they actually went all the way here for somebody realized, oh God, I'm offline? You know how many hours somebody would have to go pecking at this with their copper tools to get this dug out, realizing that they're totally off, whenever they probably had a popped line going here already scratched on this thing that they were supposed to peck out. If they're doing it in that pecking way, that would. There's about 150 pieces like this that show that they went off angle with something that's a saw that works so fast that they don't go 1 inch or something even with it and go whoopsie. They've gone so far of a distance. It's like whenever you're cutting a board and you go and you get off, and then you have to back up and then go back into it again. We're lucky that we have any of these mistakes shown to us. The way Egyptians are, there are really not any mistakes, and everybody says, oh, there's no mistakes. Look at this right here. What the hell does that tell you? It's strange. It starts adding up whenever you start looking at these Ooparts and stuff, and then you find out, you know, some of these older temples that they had and the precision that's allowed are shown in them is extraordinary. This actually is tapered exactly, yet exactly flat all the way up. I know there's an unfinished obelisk. Look at this one that was finished. Hell, look at the one that's in Rome, right there by the Vatican. Other ones have easily shown these people have a precision. You look at the cuts where all these letters are, and though it's supposedly been wind burned and sandblasted by sands for thousands of years now, it looks so damn good that whenever you look and you say, well, this whole temple was built about that same time, and you look back down over to the left, you see erosion on a lot of stuff that you don't see up here, or even at the base of it or anywhere, trapped inside of walls sometimes and things that leads you to believe this had to have been built before that. It doesn't make any sense for it to be built in any other way, before or after. So here's that Abu Ruwash that I was telling you about here, and I don't know if it picks up in the camera here or not whenever you're looking across this thing. But whenever you do, you can see where the instrument that was cutting this stopped, and it literally shaved to there. And if you'll look real close, right about where that shadow ends, there's another one. like it's shaved to here, and then this one is shaved to there. Only problem is this isn't straight at all. This thing is convex. It has a sallow to it like this. Not near as much exaggerated as I just showed right there, but you can make it out if you're looking right along here. And I often thought that maybe this is some type of observatory thing. There are not a whole lot of pieces around this. This is really something separate. But in that fact, maybe they rubbed this down with oil, and I wonder if you did, and at nighttime when you're standing up here over it and you're looking at it, if the reflection off the sky is not magnified somewhat. Maybe you can see things a whole lot better. 2 times magnification, 2.5, 3, 10. What are we looking at here? Kind of crazy. So this is just a few of these Ooparts that we're looking at, and this is some of the things that we say there was a lost high technology. There we go. Maybe you can now see that extra line that's right through there. See it? Right through there. So you can see where it's been scoured one time and then scoured another time. Just make no sense. Really doesn't. And let's see, can we see it like that? So it has that slight convex surface. I know it looks cut square real good. We get down onto it, and this part of it, the whole thing is a square, and yet this has a bevel to it. Could be used in that way. No telling why they went through the trouble of that. Was it a mistake? I don't think so. It's about 1.5 inches deeper in the center than it is at the 4 corners. Don't know why they would have done something like that whenever all the other rocks that are out here at this place are pretty much shown to be regular. And then a lot of the other ones are just rough as hell, and they've got so much weathering on them. And I understand that limestone weathers faster and easier than this granite does, but come on now. Doesn't seem to make much sense whenever you try to put all that together. It just seems a little too much to take in. Like the Serapeum up under one of the pyramids here, they have the world's most perfect box. Uncharted X did a whole video about it. Here we see a dual laser showing that that corner is actually perfect and then shoots across to an angle. I believe it's actually that golden section, golden mean that we looked at, sacred geometry and so on. It's perfect. The weird oddity here, though, is even though they cut it all square, the bottom of it's wonky, and no one knows why they did that for a reason, because it's up, and it's not like they messed up by 1/4 of an inch, but it's pulled up quite a bit in one corner for some reason. Looks quite on purpose compared to the regular things that you see there. And this box, again, when you look at this, the incredible squareness. Some of these people have gotten in this box and take a look at it closely, took exact little squares and things and went to the edges of it and say that, you know, there's no sense for right in the square itself, in the edge, in the corner, for it to come to a perfect point corner. It could be rounded off a little bit. There's no reason why would they go to the nth degree to make it just exactly whenever they could have had it smoothed off some. That's a lot more work involved, and yet they went through it again, and it seems like it was nothing to them. Really strange effect here. So this is, you know, we've looked at 4 or 5 different things. Like I said, Uncharted X is a great video for it, so you can take a look at it. And this is some pictures done by Jenna Jameson here. But here's 3 or 4 or 5 artifacts that are showing something in a technology that's just not pounding on rocks. It's not brass. It's not coppery, like they say. Something far more advanced, or they couldn't get it to this point. And what could have led them to this point? Again, it's got a lot of people saying, well, this stuff is a lot older. There's a lost civilization mixed in here because Nakata and people don't come into there. But then all of a sudden it sure does snap into these people making pyramids and doing everything, and then phew, kind of goes away. Kind of never comes back to that level. Anyhow, let me know what you think down below. we'll get on to another one. Mention a few of the other Ooparts down there, and I might string them together and make another vid. Peace.